Hi, I'm Adrian.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and today Adrian and I are going to be talking about feedback. This has been a topic of conversation that we've been talking about for a long time, but especially because there was a recent study that came out that said only 1 in 5 employees get the feedback that they actually need. However, if you ask the managers what feedback looks like, feels like, and how it goes, they think that it goes really well. So something is missing, and we want to discover what's missing and how do we do feedback better.
I'm going to say it blunt. I feel like people are terrible at feedback.
They're not great. I
They're
try to
not
be
great at it.
hopeful, but
Yeah. But one of the other things that Gallup found that I thought was really fascinating is that regardless of company size, employees who said that they received meaningful feedback in the past week are 3 times more engaged than employees who didn't. So the single highest leverage thing you can do on any given day is give your team real feedback. And so what I would love to dig into today is why does feedback matter? How do we get better at it? And what are some tactical, practical tools and tips that people can take forward to get better at giving and receiving feedback?
let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, but first let's start with an icebreaker.
Okay, what's the icebreaker this time?
What is the most recent piece of feedback that you got, and was it actually useful?
Okay, so actually, it was from you. I
Okay.
got some feedback slash advice from you. A project that I've been working on that I feel like I hit roadblock after barrier after roadblock after barrier, and I felt like I was pestering a client. And you said just keep having a bias towards action. Like keep asking, keep reaching out, reach out maybe in a different way. And they have yet to respond to me, but I do feel a little less awkward about it and much more that I'm just trying to be helpful and I'm trying to provide something to them. So that bias towards action keeps me from getting in my head and not moving forward. So
I love
thank
that.
you.
You're so welcome. I love that.
Yeah.
Um,
What about you? Do you have a recent piece of advice or feedback that you've been given?
Yeah, I got a piece of feedback from my husband last night, Will Jones, as we lovingly call him.
Full
Um,
name. Full
Full
yeah.
name, Will Jones. I have realized that I can be really blunt in my delivery. I really value myself for candor and being comfortable giving and receiving feedback and transparency. But he said, honey, I'm not saying to sugarcoat things, but you could work on your bedside manner.
Oh, interesting that you say that because I got some things I wanna talk about related to
Right, and
bedside
so I
manner.
thought it was such a good, perfect segue into this, and I wrote in my notes app to talk to you about this later. You have a PhD in healthcare communication, like, you literally studied bedside manner, and so I was like, "What could I learn from Melissa's experience in how to deliver potentially hard news or hard
Mhm.
information in a better way?" So I think that's, like, a good way to tee up.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you say that because I think that you're better at giving the feedback that people actually need to hear, and I might soften it too much. So maybe we can Goldilocks and meet in the middle.
I love that. I
Okay.
I think that sounds great.
Well, what's wrong with feedback?
Yeah. So, why does feedback matter? I think that number one, without external information, people can't really calibrate performance. One of the things that I've been thinking about is if you want people to get better, they have to take a shot, potentially miss a little bit, and then they get feedback on how that performance is going. When you play video games or when you are doing sharpshooting, which I grew up doing, you,
Of course
you
you
know,
did.
you get immediate real-time feedback, right? You hit the target or you didn't. You land in the fire or you don't. But in the workplace, people aren't getting that real-time feedback. And so it's up to the manager or to the teammate or to somebody outside the individual to let them know what's working and not working. And you mentioned earlier that gap of 1 in 5 employees say that they get feedback on a weekly basis. Um, and we know that that impacts engagement. So those are 2 big reasons that I think we need to be spending some time talking about feedback.
Yeah, but it's also not just a people problem. Thinking about some of the companies that we work for, whether it's a hospital or a petrochem plant, there's an operational risk too. I remember distinctly thinking about what I wanted to talk about today and how there is like such a big risk, especially in the industries we work in. But thinking about most of the big disasters that have ever happened, whether you're talking about like something as big as Chernobyl or the Columbia disaster or Deepwater Horizon here in Louisiana, almost always, once you research the problem of what happened, you can go back to somebody knew about the problem and didn't do anything with that information. And it terrifies me to think about some of the people that we are coaching and working with, that they may not feel comfortable giving feedback about a work product or uh, it's something very small, but that small thing creates a culture where the big thing is missed. And that's terrifying to me.
Yeah, and I think it's like those are high risk examples,
Mhm,
right? And they
mhm.
totally matter, and we deal with it a lot in petrochem and in healthcare where safety is on the line, but I even see it with project management teams. You know, when I worked at a creative agency where the stakes were very low, but, like, what it would ultimately result in is a really pissed off client, maybe people spending a lot of extra time working on something that if it had been flagged earlier or if feedback that had been given, things could have gone a very different direction.
So this just isn't a people problem. It's bigger than that. It's a cultural problem, and I understand why how important it is. But even if you understand how important it is, you still might be really bad at it. So why are people bad at feedback, in your opinion?
Yeah. Um, why are people bad at it? I think about Kim Scott's radical candor
Oh yeah, that's your
framework, which is
favorite.
my favorite. So it's a two by two matrix. And we'll share it in the show notes. But, you know, in the upper right quadrant, what you're trying to get to is radical candor, which means you care deeply and challenge directly. So on the vertical axis, it's how much do you care? And the horizontal axis is how much do you challenge. And so you want to care deeply and challenge directly. And most leaders fall into the category of what's called ruinous empathy,
Mm,
where they care deeply, but they're afraid to challenge. And what I always say is that's about you, not them. Like you think you're doing them a favor by not telling them you have spinach in your teeth. Guess what? They still got spinach in their teeth, and somebody else is still gonna see it. Like, it's one of the, like, number one ways to,
it's
like,
almost
erode my
yeah,
trust.
it's almost
It
selfish.
is selfish. It ruinous empathy is truly ruinous to the relationship because you are doing it to protect your own feelings, not truly the feelings of the other person. Because if you did care about them, you would say the hard thing because you want them to be successful.
Right.
And that's, I think, one of the most important things to understand about feedback
Mhm.
is it's one of the best ways you can show that you care.
Right. That shift in mindset about feedback is similar to the shift in mindset that finally stuck into my head about delegation. It's not just me getting something off my plate, it's giving like somebody reframed it for me as it's giving somebody else an opportunity to learn and grow with this new task or this new skill. Plus it also frees me up to be able to do the things that only I can do. I like that same shift in feedback, that it's less about you and it should be all about them. And so thank you for always telling me when I have spinach in my tea.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, talk about what are some of the ways that people can get better at feedback, or what are some of the maybe what are some of the excuses that people have for not being good at giving feedback or not delivering feedback?
Yeah, so this is where I would talk about one of my favorite humans that I've never met, but I feel like I know her because I read her books and listen to her podcast. It's Brene Brown. So thinking about the behaviors that people identify as barriers to courage. So she has an entire book, Dare to Lead, about courage, and especially it's really helpful in the workplace. But that could include avoiding the tough conversations, or including giving that honest feedback. That was the biggest barrier for a leader to be able to be successful or to feel like they have the courage to lead a group of humans. The ability to give that feedback, and especially when it might not be the most positive feedback in the world. Though we'll talk about positive feedback later, we're not great at that either. But that dodge that happens, it kind of reminds me of what you're talking about with the ruinous empathy. um, it's going to be a culture and climate buster.
What do you mean?
I mean that the dodge of not giving the feedback is still going to create trust issues. People are still going to talk about you behind their back. People are still gonna make mistakes that they keep not getting the feedback on. People are gonna feel like they're not gonna build their confidence through constructive or helpful, positive feedback. They're not getting that, so that toxic mentality is still going to fester and potentially create a culture breaking scenario.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in a culture where everyone would talk about someone and not give them that feedback directly, and I would sit there and think, "What are they saying about me behind closed doors?" You know? It makes you think, gosh, it first makes you think the bar of excellence is perfection, and if you don't hit perfection, everybody's gonna talk about you behind your back, but not say anything to your face.
Right, and that bar of perfection probably keeps moving.
Yeah, absolutely, and, we talked about the caring personally. On the bottom of that spectrum is not caring, right? So there's, I can't remember the exact phrasing of it. It's like toxic insincerity or
Mm.
something manipulative insincerity. That's when you say everything is good gravy, but it's not out of a place of care. It's out of a place of just being manipulative and mean. Like you're like, "Oh no, you don't have anything in your teeth." That's a mean person, right? When it's coming from a place of, "I want you to walk out of here with spinach in your teeth because that's going to make me look better." That's a small minority. Ouch, that sucks. But the other side of it is when you don't care about the person, but you are comfortable challenging directly. That's when you kind of come off as obnoxious aggression. That's when you're a jerk. And honestly, I'd rather have somebody that's obnoxiously aggressive and I know where they stand than I would somebody who's going to be manipulatively insincere or ruinously empathetic because,
Yeah.
at least you're getting the feedback that is
Yeah.
going to help you develop and get better.
It reminds me of the types of communication styles that we focus on here at Success Labs, where and how we try to coach people. Most people fall in that line of aggressive to assertive, but really the most destructive kind of communication type is the passive aggressive.
Mm.
But assertive can feel aggressive. So there's just some nuance there of the different ways that you could give feedback and care about people. I
Yeah.
like the way you frame that. It's actually giving me a little bit of food for thought. So, but I will say one of the things that becomes the biggest barrier if you don't have it, but also the biggest benefit if you do have it to giving feedback, in my opinion, the two most important things are communication and relationship building. And I want to focus on relationship building first. You cannot give good feedback. And I don't mean like good, like positive, but like helpful, valuable feedback that's actually gonna help the other person without having a good relationship. Because if you don't have that relationship, you don't know how to frame it. You don't know what to say. You don't know when to say it. You have to have the relationship first.
People have to believe that you care. You genuinely care.
Yeah. Yeah. The relationship building part is, I have a metaphor for that that someone gave me, and I wish I remember who it was because I would love to give them credit. So I did not come up with this, but I did add to it. So somebody once said, we treat relationship building like a checking account. It's transactional. Money goes in, money goes out. And so there's little human element there. But what we need to think about is that our relationship building needs to be more like a savings account. We are doing things to bank them away for later use. And the way I've kind of reinterpreted that is what we really need to do is think about relationship building as investment
Mm.
portfolios. You need to do the right thing and it will compound over time and gain you better results later. And you're not thinking about tit for tat or a tennis match right in front of you back and forth. It's truly because you care about the person and you care about the relationship and you care about the work.
Yeah.
So
Going back to Brené Brown, she always says, "Put marbles in the jar."
tell me
You know,
more.
you she would literally have a jar on her desk that you would put marbles in every time you've done something, or she would put marbles in every time you'd done something that built trust and encourage the people around her to do the same. So that way it's a visible representation of trust building, of vulnerability, of candor, of positive and constructive feedback. And so each of those kind of vulnerable moments or trust building moments adds marbles to the jar. And then when things go sideways, it might take a marble from the jar, but that's okay because you've
The
they're
jar's not
paid. The
empty.
jar's not empty, right? You've
Yeah.
been paid dividends, to use your example.
I really like that, the visual for that, but also the act of, like, stopping to name, we just went through a vulnerable moment, and I feel even though we need to let the emotions and the dust settle, I feel like I'm closer more closely connected to you, and I that builds trust over time. I really like that. I might get us some jars and some marbles.
I love it.
Okay.
I love it.
Okay, we've talked a little bit about this, but I wanna dive into I want your take because you see this a lot with some of the people that you work with here. What are the ways that people get feedback wrong?
Yeah. So where or how exactly are people bad at feedback? I think the number one way is people are not specific enough. So they say great job or that was a little low energy, but getting super specific
Mhm.
in what that feedback looks like is how people can make it actionable. So an example, um, instead of saying you did a great job in that meeting, say you did a great job with the client. You listened really well, but then showed them that you understood their problem by articulating it very clearly at the end. I appreciate the way that you circled back to the concerns that were voiced at the very beginning of the conversation. It showed that you followed the thread all the way through. That's something that's very specific and very concrete and helps the person say, oh, okay, I really added value by keeping track of the conversation, re-articulating at the end and showing the customer that I heard them and they
Yeah.
understood their problem.
And let me do that again in the next meeting.
Yeah.
That's the whole
That's
point.
exactly
Yeah,
right. That's exactly right.
yeah. What else
Um,
is wrong with feedback?
I think the another way that people are bad at it is just by not giving it at all.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think that's the ruinous empathy piece,
Mhm.
right? It's the, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to hurt their feelings. And so you walk out of the meeting and everybody's like, that was great. But then it's like you have this like sinking feeling that maybe it wasn't actually great or you could have done better, but you're not sure exactly why. Um, I remember an example of I'd been working with a speech coach. I had to give my first keynote, and she had filmed me giving my speech, and then said, "You did great. No notes, excellent. You just need to go back and watch your tape. Just watch your tape, and then come back and do it again."
How many things did you find to change in that speech
And I was
once
like,
you
"How
watched?
many times did I touch my hair? How much did I smack my lips?" Like, all these things I was swaying, like, all of these physical things that it was, like, obvious that I was doing, and had she just named it, it's like she thought she was saving me the embarrassment, but it's like, "No, that's what I'm paying you for. Actually, you suck, and I don't wanna work with you anymore. Sorry, you know who you are," you
Yeah.
know? And so, like, 98% of employees will fail to be engaged if they don't get feedback. Like that's what the research says is we have an engagement problem in our country, historic numbers of disengagement. What is driving that is largely the manager and their lack of feedback and engagement with the employee.
If I could tell managers all over the country, I've got the secret sauce to make sure that 98% of your team is going to be more engaged, like, can I bottle that up and sell it?
You would think that you could.
I could retire really quickly, yeah. Another thing that I was gonna talk to you about and see what your take on it is that feedback when we talk about feedback, I think people only think about the negative. They don't think about how there's a whole other half of it where there's
You mean
helpful feedback. You did a good job. Like it's only constructive. It's not, there's no like recognition or praise in it. It's
I think
only
about it
negative.
like a heart pulse
Okay.
monitor, right? So if this is your baseline, you got to be pulsing above the line and a little bit below. You want to have more pulses above the line than below the line, right?
Yeah, I think that's the way they work, but
I
I
don't know if
don't
that's how they work.
I'll ask my mom, the former ER
Okay.
nurse. Yeah. Well, and that's funny. I was just talking. I have a client that I'm working with right now. I was coaching this person this morning, actually. And I said, your homework I gave you 2 weeks ago was to give more compliments to your team. And I literally said compliments, not feedback, because I wanted him to focus on the positive. And I said, how's that going? And he said, well, I got to admit, I did a really good job. But I think what I was doing is telling him something good and then saying, but you also need to do this. I said, buddy, every time you say whatever and but, they only hear what comes after the but.
That's right.
And I said, your new homework assignment is to give compliments and to only make them positive because he doesn't feel comfortable enough to do that. And we talked a lot about how that's probably because he doesn't have good enough relationships with them.
Trust isn't there.
The trust is not there. And that trust has to be there. You have to know your people. You have to know in what ways, what can I say to turn up the dial here and turn it back here. You have to know your people. That's why relationship building and communication are crucial to feedback
Yeah.
and leadership in general.
And I think that's why some people struggle with radical candor, right? Because the feedback can be perfectly worded. This is why I think radical candor got a bad rap in Silicon Valley, because it was like, I'm just going to be radically candid. And then they would roast somebody, right? I worked in a culture that did that. That is different,
That would
right?
be
That
demoralizing.
is obnoxious aggression
Yeah.
on the, because they weren't caring directly. If you
No.
care directly, you're going to give your feedback in a specific way, one on one, in a timely fashion, and it's going to be with the intent of improving the other person's performance, or helping them see something that will help them be more successful.
That's yeah, kind of spot on. Yeah, I would hate to work with people like that. Thank God we don't.
Yeah, no bueno. You mentioned relationship building and communication earlier. How does communication come into play?
It's everything. It's absolutely everything. So this is where I get really nerdy, and if you're okay with it, I'd love to share a little bit more about some of the research that I did back
Yeah.
in grad school. But it's not just verbal; it's also nonverbal, and the nonverbal matters a whole lot more. There's a research study that is one of the most misquoted research studies that's out there. They say that it says something to the effect of like 92% of a message's meaning is derived from the nonverbal.
Ooh, it's say more.
Okay, but that's technically correct, but there's a caveat, there's added context to it that actually makes it a little bit more nuanced. Essentially what that study proved is that when the person receiving the message is confused, they will rely on the nonverbal 92% of the time more than the verbal. Only when there's confusion. But when there's not confusion, when the person says, "Hey, you did a really good job," they're gonna accept that as, "I did a good job." But if they're like, "You did a really good job today," you are confused because I'm saying one thing and saying another thing. So you're going to take you 90% of the time will take what I didn't say, what my body said, not what my mouth said.
Definitely.
Yeah. Sorry.
The first thought I had is like, this is why it's important to like have bathroom breaks and snack breaks, because I can't tell you how many times I've looked like very grumpy in a meeting. I'm like, no, I just have to pee, or I just need an Uncrustable.
We should be sponsored by Uncrustable. Member of
Yeah.
they're eaten in this office.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta take a break, and make sure that you get it right. Not only what you say, but how you say it. You've gotta get both of those right. It's so important.
Yeah. So we'll dig into here in a second, maybe some specific examples of how
I've got
people
some
can
more
use
nerdy
body
stuff for
language.
you.
Okay, good. So then I think the question is, how do you get feedback right?
Mhm.
And the first thing that I tell people to do is prepare. This is especially important for someone like me who can put their foot in their mouth, right? I'm an external processor. And
Yeah.
so I need to make sure to process my conversation in advance and prepare so that way I can be thoughtful and intentional in how I do it. So, there are three types of feedback. I'm going to look at my notes so I get them all right.
Yeah.
There's coaching, there's evaluation, and there's appreciation.
Those are
And
3
and
separate
they're
things.
3 separate things, and you wanna make sure, like, 1, what type of conversation is this? Is this a coaching conversation? Is this a feedback conversation? Or is this an appreciation conversation?
Mm.
And just defining it on the front end is going to ensure that you've got the right tone and tenor for the intent of the conversation.
That's interesting. You know, I said this today on a coaching call with a client where we are not used to getting feedback from our bosses that's not that evaluation or coaching. So for in the call that we were doing, we were having an alignment discussion around the person's their individual development plan that they created. So the boss knows what the person wants to work on and can help give them feedback. And I said, this is not a performance review. Performance reviews look backwards. This is a development plan. We're talking about what needs to happen in the future. And that shift in the what it's like I gave them freedom to not think about, "You didn't do this right," or "You should do this more." It's less about that, and it's like, "Here are some opportunities that you could take advantage of in the future." It shifted the whole conversation. It made it much more hopeful, and it was probably the first time those 2 individuals had ever had a conversation like that.
I love that. I mean, this is how you can grow in the future,
Yeah.
right? I think that's
Yeah.
really smart. And then part of that, tailor the way that you talk to the person.
Yeah.
Know what motivates them. I'm somebody that's really motivated by hard feedback. I like
You
clear,
do like,
actionable. I'm like,
yeah,
hurt me, you know,
rip the Band-Aid.
right?
Yeah.
But I know like you like it softer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's where I've got to calibrate my tone, and I'm like learning that over time, spending time with you, of how to get that way.
Mhm.
I've had employees that need to see data. They want to see the numbers. They want to see the proof. They want receipts. I have other employees, they're like, please don't show me anything. I got it. You don't have to say anymore,
I already know. I already know
right?
how
I
bad it
already
is.
know I'm good. And so understanding what motivates the person. Like, if you get this right, this is what it could mean for you.
Mhm.
That's going to look different for every
Right.
employee. And so taking the time to think about that on the front end is really important. And then the last thing I would say in terms of, preparing, maybe two more thoughts. One, I would say really separate out observation from intention.
Mm.
And this is hard. When you do this, it can result in this, or I feel this. But don't say you are so lazy, or this is you're lazy when you do this. Don't ascribe intention to it. Say,
Right.
I I'm struggling to I'm struggling how to interpret this. When you fail to do all the steps that are outlined in the process,
Mhm.
it reads to me as lazy because I can't understand any other reason for why you wouldn't do it since you know all the steps to the process.
Right.
And the person might say, "Oh, I thought those were just
Suggestions?
suggestions or whatever," Or I'm coaching a client right now. On the call with her executive sponsor, he said, "I just don't understand why you don't join the 8 o'clock meetings." She said, "What 8 o'clock meetings?" "The 8 o'clock meetings that we're all on." She said, "I've never gotten an invite to an 8 o'clock meeting." He was like, "Well, there's no invite. You just call this number." And she was like, "Well, nobody's told me anything about this." And so it's like they have been perceiving her and gave her explicit feedback that she wasn't being a team player, that she wasn't being visible. Little did she know there's this call that was happening that she was never invited
Never
to.
invited to.
Doesn't that break your heart?
Yeah.
It killed me. I was like, "Okay, what lesson are we gonna take from this, both of
Time
you?"
out. Yeah.
So that's where, taking the time to talk about action and then ask for interpretation rather than draw the interpretation yourself. Help me understand why this is happening. The why might be nobody ever told me.
Yeah, and if you were s the we give I feel like we build up so much anxiety around these conversations, especially the higher the stakes, the harder the anxiety hits us. What do you do, like, to start the conversation?
I think plan you've gotta plan your first line. I mean, I think
Actually
one.
write out your first sentence.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a good idea, and I mean, you've seen me do this. I will say, "Hey, I wanna talk about this thing. Do you have some time to do that?" Or, "Hey, I've been thinking about this. I'd like to talk about it with you." And give the person some context, and then, you know, plan out what you wanna say in the beginning, because, like, if you get the beginning right and you can show that you care personally,
Mhm.
and yes, you might be challenging directly, but there's more care
Yeah.
than not, then it's going to set the whole tone off very differently from just barging in and indelicately starting the conversation. But I'll
Yeah.
take an indelicate candor over the ruinous empathy any day.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So once you've prepared and you are in the room, what advice do you have for people to make sure that giving that feedback goes well?
Yeah, so I would you gave lots of great tips on how to prepare for that conversation. I think this is I mean, honestly, there's sometimes where I would even practice the conversation before you get in there, but once you get in there, there's a lot of things that are happening all at once. So this is where like I first want to say to people that are new to giving feedback, you're not going to get it all right, especially in the beginning. You are not expected to be an expert at something the first time you've done it, but it does get easier and you do get better at it over time. So you don't shy away from those conversations. You got to have the conversations. I would also say that you need to be as specific as humanly possible. Uh, if I use the example from some of the role play activities that we do in our leadership labs, where if you say you mentioned this earlier, like the lazy part, You have shown up late to work Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week, and Tuesday and Thursday of last week. You've got to be lazy. Like you must hate your job. Like that's one of the worst things you can say. Instead, we use the model of the SBI method, situation, behavior, impact. The situation is, I've noticed that you've been clocking in late. Behavior, last Tuesday and Thursday, and this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you showed up more than 15 minutes late to your shift. And then switch over to impact. When you are late, that means the rest of us can't get started on our first safety meeting of the day, and which puts us back and it delays the entire day, right? What I did there is I gave the context, talked about the behavior, not the person, not their values, not who they are in their heart, the behavior and the impact. And that takes away, not, we're not saying this is a character flaw, this is a behavior that can be fixed.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is also worth considering on that behavior piece or the impact piece is it can just be the literal impact we start the day late. But I'm a big fan of saying how you feel and recognizing that you may not be understanding what's happening,
Yeah.
right? I, I'm not somebody that actually loves to talk about their feelings, but when you can say, when you show up late, it makes me wonder if something is wrong. Am I not setting the right expectation? Do you not know when we start? It leaves me really confused and struggling to understand why this would be happening. It makes me assume maybe you don't care. And I wouldn't think that's the case. So help me connect the
Help
dots.
me to understand.
You
Yeah.
know, you can explain what you might be interpreting
Right.
so that way they can fill in the gaps once you point them out.
Well, and you just did and said one of the most important pieces of what you can do when you're in the moment of giving feedback is to ask questions. So when you're preparing, prep a couple of questions ahead of time. And then when you're in there, ask questions. And if you ask a question and you're getting no responses, sit in that awkwardness, sit in the silence, let them think about it. And it's also okay for you to say, it seems like you might not have an answer. I don't want to push you to have an answer just because we're in this conversation. Why don't you take time to think about it and we'll regroup later today or
I love
something?
that.
It's okay to take a timeout.
I love that.
The other thing that I would say is going back to it's not what you say, it's how you say it. How you say it part is critical. And I don't just mean word choice and tone of voice, though those things matter a lot. There's some subconscious things that we might do with our body language that can create tension where it doesn't need to be there or create whether it's literal or metaphorical barriers between you and the other person. So this is where I'm going to go back to my days in studying how healthcare providers communicate with their patients. I was very fortunate that when I was in grad school, I got to work on a research study where I got to observe people making decisions around end of life care for their loved ones. And um, I don't take this lightly to talk about it, but I was afforded the opportunity to be present during those conversations, which is that's an incredible gift that I was given. They did not need to give me that, but it was such a great learning experience and a touching moment for me to be able to get to witness how you communicate like that. And I saw some doctors do it really well, and I saw some do it really poorly. And there's a lot of the same things that are good and bad that we could see in how a teacher talks to a student or how a boss talks to an employee. It's the same kind of things, but different contexts. Some of them include the number of barriers between you and the other person.
What do you mean?
So, if I had my cell phone open or just in my hand, that automatically signals something else is vying for my attention. If I'm sitting at my desk and you're across from me and I've got my computer open, that is a literal block. It also could be that I'm sitting in the conversation like this, pulled away from the conversation with a barrier here. That's not just showing disinterest, it's also showing something else a little bit more primal. This is a weird thing, but all of our most vital organs are from here to here, our hips to our chin. And so when we feel like there is a threat, when we feel that we need to be defensive, we will put barriers between ourselves and the other person because we're trying to protect those vital organs. It's a subconscious thing that we do when we feel uncomfortable in any way, whether that's a threat or just that it just makes us uncomfortable. But also, you can think about proximity. So, like, how far away am I from that person? the more comfortable you feel with the person and the more intense the conversation, I would say get closer. So maybe not sitting across from each other at a desk. Maybe y'all are on each corner. So like somebody's sitting right here and talking to me. Also, whose office is this in? If it's in my office, I'm the boss and I'm giving feedback, that's going to be taken very differently if it's in your office, if you're the employee, or in a neutral space. And I would also consider timing. Um, I would consider when you're having the conversation. Is it at the end of the day, the beginning of the day, right after they finished the big project that you want to give them feedback on? You got to be considerate of timing. And you can also be aware of that when thinking about spatial proximity. There's a difference between standing, like if I'm high, like if my chair was higher than your chair, I'm gonna probably be out of frame, but I want to show this. I would take the feedback very differently if I'm sitting up over you. Like this automatically changes the way we're talking to each other. Versus like we're even, that's a little bit more even versus all the way down. I'm getting all the way down. That's actually me showing a sign of respect. I'm not trying to tower over you. I'm actually like putting you as a sign of respect. It's why certain cultures bow to each other, or why in certain conversations, like at the bedside in a hospital, the physician will actually sit down so they are lower than the patient and actually hold their hand when they're giving them bad news.
That's how I can work on my bedside manner.
I mean, there's some things that we could do, but yeah, you're better than you think you are. But it takes conscious practice to soften our approach. But our body language is the way that we soften it.
I love that. I want to drill in on something
Yeah,
that you
what's that?
said that made me think about a piece of feedback I received once that was so valuable. I had just taken over a VP level role in an organization. I had the cushy corner office with big windows like this. I mean, it was like, and I had been in a cubicle for
Oh, so
years. So I
you were
was
riding high.
pumped. And so I was having my one on ones in there because I had a whole little seating area and it was great. And one day, after a one-on-one, one of my other team members came in and said, "Hey, can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Sure." And she goes, "I'm gonna close the door." I said, "Okay." She said, "I just wanna let you know that when somebody leaves your office, everybody looks at them. So we can tell when you've had a hard conversation with someone."
Ooh, yeah.
And I was, like, gut-wrenched. I mean, like, I felt my stomach drop because I had just given someone hard feedback, and I could tell they had glistening eyes about it, and it was feedback she needed to hear, but I didn't think about the fact that she then had to walk out of my office and see everybody look up from their cubicles at her like little prairie dogs. I forgot I'm the boss. Everybody's paying attention to my corner office. And I was like, "Okay, thank you so much for that feedback. I feel awful." Right? But it's the things you don't think about. So I started doing one-on-ones in a little co-working space upstairs that, again, neutral ground and a space where it was close to a restroom. If people sometimes you make people cry, they've got room to go process the feedback or sit in the break room after or just, you know, walk out without feeling like they're being watched and observed.
Mhm,
And so that was just such a valuable lesson for me in power dynamics
mhm.
and how that plays into giving and receiving feedback.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's other things too beyond that, which I could talk about that all day. Maybe that's a future episode. Write that down. But I do think that I want to reiterate something I said earlier, but I really mean it that silence is a tool that you can use, not to empower them or take power over them, but silence is a tool sometimes that you just need to let it sit. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see young leaders make when the first time they have to have a feedback conversation is they put the thing out there and then there's a little bit of silence and they get uncomfortable. They're like, "Well, but it's not that bad." And they go off script.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
they look like they're not in control of the conversation. They look like they're not confident. And then you start to go, "Do I believe this?" And if I was also easily intimidated in a situation like that, I might start to go, "I don't know where this is going or where this is leading." And if I was not easily intimidated, I'd be like, "I smell blood in the water."
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
now you now feel uncomfortable. I'm
Yeah.
gonna continue making you feel uncomfortable until I can get out of this
Yeah.
conversation.
I've seen that happen.
Yeah,
But I've seen both versions happen.
yeah.
Somebody totally check out and you can tell you've lost them. And I've
Mhm.
seen somebody get totally sharky.
Yeah,
So that's a good segue. Like, what happens when things start to go off the rails?
yeah.
What can lead things off the rails, and what do you do?
I guess the first thing I would wanna say there is it's okay if it goes off the rails. We are humans. You never know how you're going to react in the moment. I think if you have really good intent, that can help you, but it's not the whole thing. But I think you need to be paying attention as hard as it is. I mean, I've done this for years. I've spent a lot of time researching body language, and I still have a hard time if I'm truly engaged in the conversation. I am not doing that thing where I lean back and like study what's going on. It's hard for me to see it when I'm in it. And so, but there are some things that are obvious signs, like if somebody starts crying or shuts down, starts to change their body language, right? Or they feel like there's a counter, like you're getting a counterattack. Well, but so and so is always late too. Why are you only getting on to me? That's where things start to go off the rails, and you can start to pick up on it before there's a total meltdown. And so, in those moments, recognize that you have triggered something, and it is okay, and it's okay to acknowledge it, and it's also okay to take a time out to when you can come back where you're both a little bit more level-headed and ready to have the conversation. So what I would do is slow down, acknowledge the emotion, talk about it. I can see, like, your body, and I wouldn't say, "It looks like you're angry." I'd say, "Your body language has shifted a little bit, and I recognize that that might be, like, an emotion that you're feeling. Tell me what you're thinking and tell me what you're feeling."
One of the things that I am so comfortable saying is, "I don't know how to interpret your face right now."
Mhm.
Because sometimes I do struggle with it, but I've used that when I could see one of my employees that looked angry,
Mhm.
and I didn't want to say, "I don't know why you're angry." I
Yeah.
said, I don't know how to read your face right now.
Tell me what you're
Tell
feeling.
me what you're feeling."
Yeah.
And what I realized is they were holding back tears, and I was totally misinterpreting it.
And there you feel very different when somebody is treating you with anger versus sadness.
I could hear in their tone that they were fighting back emotion,
Yeah.
and that changed my tone because I could feel myself tensing up and
Yeah.
getting a little bit defensive because I thought they were getting angry.
Yeah.
And so I was glad that I paused in that moment.
Yeah. Another thing that, like, the pause is really important to take a time out. The more important the feedback, the more likely you're gonna have this conversation more than once.
Tell me more about that?
So if it's really important to that person's development, it's not the spinach in the teeth, that's a one-time thing. But if it's something where they have a recurring problem, you're probably gonna have to have this conversation more than once. I like to joke, I say this, but, and I mean this with, like, the best of intent, we're adults are just grown-up toddlers.
Yeah.
We need a nap, a snack, and a hug, and we sometimes need to be told over and over again, "Don't hit your brother," or whatever it is, "Don't grab the cat's tail." You gotta be told that over and over again, and sometimes as adults, we still miss the message or it doesn't connect or resonate with us in some way, so sometimes you have to keep having the conversation. That's okay too.
Yeah.
So, try to get it right, but recognize that you might have to have this conversation more than once, and that's okay. Might be frustrating because 'cause you'd want them to just pick up on whatever you're telling them immediately, but it might not always work that way.
This is where I think about the role that positive feedback plays as well. So, I was talking about the heart reminder, which maybe I don't know how those work, but it's like if you want more pulses above the line to build that trust than below the line, what you also need to do is when you give somebody feedback, constructive feedback,
Mhm.
and then they come and improve performance, come tell them. So
Yeah.
I remember I had a woman on my team who was wicked smart. She was an analyst, she was brilliant, but she was like a cliche nerdy analyst, right? Her hair was frizzy. She did not care what she wore. She drank hideous gray protein smoothies that everybody could see and smell, right? She was just like a beast,
Yeah.
in the best way. But she wanted to advance in her career and she really wanted a more visible role. And so I said, like, I hate to tell you, sister, but one of the things you're going to need to do is put on a blazer and comb your hair. And like I gave her that feedback. And I've probably used a similar example in other times because so often it's the physical limitations of people that are holding them back.
Yeah.
I gave her that feedback. She bucked me, whatever, in the moment. But the next time it came to a presentation, she had on a blazer. She had on some cute little pointy flats. She had her hair pulled back in a ponytail, but she'd clearly like made an effort with it,
Mhm.
right? And so I took the moment as soon as we were done with that meeting and people had cleared the room. I said, "Hey, I just wanna let you know, you not only did you nail that presentation, I see that you really put effort into your appearance. I promise that was not superficial. That was part of what gave this room confidence in you presenting the
Yeah.
information." And she was, like, beaming so happy after that. She would, like, send me J. Crew sales or whatever, what the it it's that calibration, right?
Yeah.
It's that real-time feedback to say, "Hey, I saw you
Mhm.
taking my feedback and applying it. Great job. It worked in your favor."
It also sounds like you tailored that feedback to her, to where
Yeah.
it and side note, men need to pay attention to what they're wearing and how it plays into their leadership just as much as women, just putting that out there.
1,000%.
It
Can I tell
matters.
you that
Yeah.
God's honest truth?
What?
Women are oftentimes more open to it than men are.
Absolutely.
That has been my experience. I have given similar feedback to my male
Interesting. Yeah.
colleagues, and they still show up in the untucked polo, but
With with their finance bro vest on. Yes, yes.
so
Well,
to each their own.
yeah, so that making it specific is not just about, like, the thing that you observed, but it's also making it specific to the human that you're
Yeah.
giving the feedback to. And one of the things you can, that a lot of people have heard of love languages, right? And
Mm.
that's in romantic relationships. But there is for a long time, I loved love languages, and I kept saying, like, "This would be so cool. I need to write, like, the workplace version of it." Well, little did I know that Gary Chapman, the guy that wrote love languages, he already wrote one. It's called Languages of Appreciation, and I have a very short story to explain, like, it's the same 5 languages of how you love someone or how you show appreciation. It's the same ones.
What is touch?
Uh, it'd be high five
High
or
five.
pointing at somebody. Like,
Oh.
"You had a really great idea today."
Oh, I love
That's
that.
the workplace, the HR version.
Friendly version. Okay, sorry, I had to ask. Okay,
Yeah,
keep
yeah,
going.
or it could just be, like, sitting in proximity to somebody, or pointing your body towards them when you're giving them feedback or talking to them. It doesn't have to be literal touch, but just, like, connecting with that person through body language. I am very involved in my sorority as an alumna, and I had a role where, for keeping it as simple as possible, I had some peers, and my peer was elected to be my supervisor in the organization, and she asked me we had our first conversation in this new role, and she said, "Look, I'm just gonna name it. We are friends. We are sorority sisters. We are friends. We used to be peers, and now I'm your supervisor, for lack of better words. That could be kind of awkward. But I wanna just, like, go ahead and name it. I was like, "Thank you, this is great. Let's talk about it, like, 'cause that's what we do here." But then also she asked me a very important question. She said, "I would like to understand in what ways you like to receive praise."
Hmm.
I was like, "Nobody's ever asked me that
No one's
before.
ever asked me that before.
No one's ever we do this work for a living." So I was like, "Can I think about it and get back to you?" And I thought about it, and what I realized is it's a nonprofit organization. We do not have budgets to send people, like, gifts if they do something really nice, and we live all over the country, so there can't be proximity or time really spent. And I said, one thing that this organization is really good at is if you go above and beyond at a project that you're working on, as volunteers, sometimes the only thing that our supervisor can do is send us a $5 Starbucks gift card via email, which is lovely. But no offense to Starbucks, I cannot consume coffee or caffeine. I cannot consume gluten. I try really hard to not use single-use plastics, and I think that Starbucks coffee shops smell bad.
Okay. Wow,
So
shots
that's
fired.
yeah,
Oh
I
my
mean,
god.
their playlists on Spotify are wonderful, but, like, that gift, that token of appreciation, it doesn't actually mean much to me, and in fact, I would just give them to somebody else on the team and say, "Hey, I can't use this, you can use it." And so I said, "That doesn't mean much. It doesn't feel like you're customizing that level of appreciation or praise to me." And she said, "Well, what would you like?" And I said, "Well, I'm a words of affirmation girly. I like people to tell me nice things." And so she said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna start emailing you when you do something really well, and I'm gonna copy my boss on it." I said, "That means way more to me." In fact, I have in every inbox that I have a folder called Keepers, and I just keep those emails that make my heart flutter, and if I'm ever having a bad day, sometimes I go back and read a few of them because 'cause I'm not all bad, I just may have made a little bit of a boo-boo somewhere, so that means more to me. So I think the point of that whole story is that we have to not only, be consistent with our constructive feedback, but be consistent with our positive feedback and tailor it to the human and their motivational or love language of appreciation. Tailor it to them. It's going
Yeah,
to mean so much more, and, they're probably gonna believe it and use it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was a great example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about what we've heard. Let's
Yeah.
recap.
Yeah.
So one what I heard is feedback is a relationship skill
Mhm.
before it is a communication skill. So you've
Yep.
got to invest in those deposits, those marbles in the jar
Mhm.
before you need them. Um, most people aren't failing at feedback because they're doing it badly. They're failing because they're not doing it at all.
Correct.
So it's not feedback if it's not specific and it's not timely. So one of the biggest mistakes you can make is just being silent or being ambiguous.
Mhm.
And then we heard that positive feedback is not just fluffy stuff. It's really like the fuel that helps someone understand when they're getting it right. It puts those marbles in the jar.
Mhm.
And it's how you really tailor appreciation to the individual.
Absolutely.
So if recognition isn't a regular part of your rhythm, then your feedback isn't going to land in a
Yeah.
consistent way. Did I miss anything
No,
else?
that's a really great recap, and I think, hopefully this, uh, was like food for thought. We planted a seed to help people feel a little bit more comfortable around the concept of feedback and how to do it well and where we get it wrong so we can watch out for that. But I think that there's probably more to learn and more for us to learn too, which we can continue sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommended reading or resources
Yeah.
for our listeners?
Well, I think you would probably say that we need to all read Radical Candor by Kim
Absolutely
Scott.
love it.
Yes, and then, one that has been on my bookshelf for a long time, and so I'm saying it out loud in front of whoever is watching so they can hold me accountable. I need to read Thanks for the Feedback by Douglas Stone. I think that and, Sheila Heen. I think that would be a really great one for me. And then, of course, anything by Brené Brown, but especially Dare to Lead. I think that's where you can really dig into courage and, how to clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And then, of course, I mentioned most recently Gary Chapman and Paul White's book, The Languages of Appreciation. And they have a free assessment on their website that you can take to understand what yours is and have all of your teammates take it too so that you can understand what their language of appreciation is as well.
Awesome. I love that. So with that, that's our episode. Thanks for joining. If this resonated with you at all, if you would like some additional resources for having those development conversations or constructive conversations, please reach out to us on our website, successlabs.com. Follow us on social. Melissa has a great communication guide that you can find on our website that she's teased on social as well. And is there anything else I need to say, Kelly? And that's it.
Happy feedback sessions.
Yay.